Man, it has been a minute. This is a trip down memory lane for us, Evan. We've been heads down building, but it feels good to be back, and this background is still as fresh as ever. But anyway, we are really happy to actually have another show today because Chris Amani dropped, the CEO here of TerraForm Labs. Welcome to the show. He dropped a bombshell presentation, a keynote at Cosmoverse in Istanbul this year. What was that, a week ago, something like that, and really just announced a bunch of projects that I bet no one here has heard of. Maybe if you've been following along, you've heard a little bit about Enterprise, or you've heard about Warp, or you've heard about Alliance, but he really put all the pieces together for TerraForm Labs vision, announced a couple of new products that I'm sure no one there has ever heard of, and we are here to grill him and get all the luscious details on all of those projects. But first, Chris, how you doing? How you doing over there? And for those who don't maybe haven't seen you, don't know you, can give a quick intro to yourself and how you came into the position you're in now.
Yeah, so doing well. I don't know. I don't think I could even do the full backstory of how I ended up kind of in the Terra community to begin with, but
we know where it started. It was on this network with Terra Crumbs.
It was, yeah. So the first time, my first event and kind of interaction with the community was I showed up. I learned everything I knew at the time about Terra from Pete and Evan through Terabytes, and I was following them on Twitter. They were at a bar in New York around the time of Masari Mainnet. I showed up, followed them around. They had no clue who I was. It was awkward, but I just kind of leaned into the awkwardness, and ended up with a show called Terra Crumbs on Terabytes, and then worked for Doe as essentially in a COO role prior to the DPEG, stuck around after the DPEG to help relaunch. And man, a wild set of circumstances going from, I guess, like 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, at that bar when I didn't know anyone to sitting in this seat. But I guess we won't go into all of the history and everything that's happened up through then, but that's the quick version of the story.
Well, I got to say, Chris, I commend you for taking on a rather difficult uphill battle with what you've done lately. I know that you guys just had I guess you were at the expo for Cosmoverse, and then you yourself personally had a presentation that seemed to have gone over quite well. Sorry, look how rusty we are at making the screen move around.
I found a photo of that original meet, by the way.
Oh, do you? Hold on.
Let's
throw that up real quick and see what that looks like. Yeah,
wow.
There we go. Look at that.
Nice. Nice.
All the old crew there. That's awesome. So Chris, I really wanted to talk or use our time today to talk mainly about two things, I think. The first is, the kind of what TFL has been up to since sort of the I don't know, pivot, I guess we could call it. Nice way to put it. And you mentioned a lot of these on stage at Cosmoverse, and it sounds like there's some excitement, boiling up behind the scenes. So I'd love to hear kind of about those projects and, ask questions and take questions from the audience. And then the other thing we want to talk about, obviously, is the proposal that's up right now from TerraForm Labs. So really the two main things we want to cover on the show. Does that sound like, are we aligned with what we were talking about then?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, how far back should I go on what TFL's been up to?
Well, I mean, even if you just want to cover, what's the focus now moving forward?
Yeah, sure.
I know that Enterprise, a lot of people have seen sort of the beta version of that, Warp, and then if you have anything you want to tell us that's undisclosed, that's really that's really why people watch this show to begin with, Chris. I don't know if you know.
So yeah. I mean, look, I went over this in the Cosmoverse presentation, so I won't go too deep into it. But obviously, taking over from Doe, in terms of both taking over the company of TFL and then being a spokesperson for our community, is kind of a daunting task, right? I don't think there are many companies within crypto or out that are more associated with their founder than TFL and Terra is with Doe, and so it was kind of a shocking moment when it happened, and I realized that I was going to need to step into the seat. Under normal circumstances, that's a pretty tough gig. For those who don't know my background, I've done that before. So I've been a CEO of a SaaS company before, and I took over from the founder. And so the strategic part of that and the operational part of that isn't new to me. But wow, this set of circumstances is probably not something many people have seen before. So I spent 3, 4, 5 months, I guess 5 months now, just kind of ruminating over the best way to be effective in doing that, right? How much of Doe's roadmap to keep, how much of his vision to keep. And people were kind of pressing pretty hard, right? A lot of people wanted answers. What's the vision? Where are you taking this? And I didn't have something fully formed yet that resonated with me, that struck the right balance between kind of respecting the past of Terra and being true to my strengths, which are much different than Doe's, and our current team, which is much different than the team that we had before, although there are a lot of holdovers, like our ability to execute. And so there was a lot of just kind of like walking around my neighborhood and thinking about that. And I presented all of this at Cosmoverse, so I won't get into the details, but ultimately what I landed on was that, the reason, what resonated with me about Terra to begin with was, the idea that we had to build something useful. The quote I used at Cosmoverse was from Doe in 2021. I'm one of those people who believe that Wall Street exists to serve Main Street and that capital allocated in a vacuum is meaningless. That was always the point of UST to me, and UST failed. But that same sentiment can be applied, I think, to building blockchain ecosystems. And I think some of the same, it's not a perfect metaphor, but some of the same things that were unsustainable about UST that ended up being problematic for UST, I would say. I think those are really problematic for a lot of blockchain ecosystems that exist today as well. Like if you can't find a variety of useful applications and ways to integrate into real economic activity, basically what ends up happening is your token becomes your product, and there's not a whole lot of meat on that. So that's the vision I can kind of carry forward. I've built a lot of applications in my past. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with building applications at scale to millions of users. And I think that our team at TFL has a unique perspective on what types of applications those are going to be. And not only that, but how we can build them in a way that no one else is really building. And so first and foremost, it's kind of pushing that forward with the products that we have on the roadmap. Number two, building all of the tools that, let me take a step back. As we started trying to build those applications, we realized that like the tooling and the infrastructure and all of the pieces that you needed to support building those types of applications successfully didn't exist. And so we kind of had to, we took a step forward, and then we took like 3 steps back to go build all of the things we were going to need to successfully execute on this vision. And that's in doing that, we have a lot of products now that I think we can supply to the Terra ecosystem that will make their ability to build similar types of applications much easier to do as well. And so, we're on this journey to bring world-class applications to Terra, but also in doing so, building out all the tools that other teams will need to go build those types of applications as well. Yeah, that's a high level. I could jump in. Should we go into enterprise or station or warp? I see you have enterprise up on the screen.
I've put enterprise up, but if you want to,
cool.
Jump in front and do something else, that's great.
Yeah, no, let's do enterprise. I'm glad you pulled up this screen. This makes it easy.
Sure.
So enterprise is one of those tools. This is one of the first things that Doe and the team was ideating on right after the relaunch. And the idea was we need to build a set of tools that makes building your applications or launching your business on Terra easier. And it remains the same. It's just that the product portfolio has expanded. So we started with Enterprise DAO. That was always meant to be kind of the tip of the spear. And then now we're layering in all of these other pieces. So, together they will be wrapped in kind of like a Web 2.5 application wrapper that pulls them all together. So we can go maybe one by one on the individual pieces, and then I'll talk about how it all comes together. And I think labor market is where it all really comes together nicely. So we have Enterprise DAO. We want to make that the best place to manage your DAO, regardless of what chain you're on. So yeah, we're deploying. You can deploy your treasuries anywhere. You can see your dashboards. You can run a cross-chain DAO essentially from Enterprise DAO, and it'll be crossing over to Ethereum at some point soon too. The treasury is the next one that will come out, and that's for those of you who are familiar with Gnosis Safe. A lot of businesses in crypto use Gnosis Safe to manage their crypto treasuries on Ethereum. This will bring all of that same type of functionality, the multi-sigs, the ability to track all of your payments, all of the things you need to run a business in Web 2. So this is targeted more kind of like at protocol teams than specifically at DAOs. But kind of the same idea, right? It's your operating system for running your business in crypto and TFL. Essentially, we're building it for TFL because I think if it solves all of our use cases, it'll solve it for a lot of other teams in crypto as well. The third one that will come out is payments. So this is, you've seen this before in DAO tooling, but we want it to be able to apply to both DAOs and protocol teams or just crypto teams generally. So streaming payments, payroll, token vesting contracts. So if you're like a team like TFL, eventually we're going to want to give some token vesting to our employees. You can manage all of that through this. The payment streams can be represented. They can either be fully committed or they can be partially committed. Fully committed ones, all of them can be represented as an NFT, but you can imagine a world where a fully committed payment stream as an NFT can now be rehypothecated into DeFi and used in a lot of different ways. If you can imagine like a token vesting contract that an employee has could be traded for like present value of expectations of what that future token grant would be worth. And so it opens up a lot of DeFi possibilities around your payment streams as well. And then lastly, labor market is where all of these different components can come together to actually start driving economic activity on chain. So whether you're a DAO or a treasury or an individual, if you need to get work done, you can come post a job here. And whether you're any of those three components either, you can come in and apply for jobs as well. So any of these different kind of, what would I call them? Participants in the enterprise or in any crypto ecosystem across any chain will be able to come together to provide or ask for labor and enterprise labor market. So if you look at that, you see basically all of the components of the things I need to do running TFL and that I think will resonate with any other team that's trying to run a business in crypto. And it's a framework for doing that. And I think the thing that's really exciting about how so like that's interesting and that people can see how maybe like a labor market would be useful, but like why and how, right? And so the how of it gets to one of the projects I tease, Project Verity, which is more of a code name than a product name. And the how of the labor market is really like, if you really want to pull this off, you have to allow people to start building decentralized reputations on chain. And a Web3 version of a labor market should ensure that no one's trapped on a platform, that when you're building your reputation, when you're building your job history, like you would be on something like Fiverr or Upwork, that you're not locked into that platform. If they make a platform change that you don't like, you could take that reputation and your job history and take it somewhere else. And so kind of wrapping that entire labor market idea and really plugging in through all of Enterprise Hub is this decentralized reputation platform that we've been building that will allow people who are doing work on enterprise labor market or even supplying work on enterprise labor market to build a Web3 crypto native reputation at the same time. And so all of those pieces are coming together. All of them are working in parallel right now, are being developed in parallel right now. And then it'll all come together in this Enterprise Hub Web 2.5 wrapper that goes around enterprise that allows you to do like all of the things that are convenient about Web 2 applications without you having any platform lock-in or going non-custodial with your funds or your identity. So you can always leave. You always have control of it's self-custodial in terms of both like the assets that you're managing and the reputation and identity that you're building, but layering in all of the Web 2 convenience functions that people need, right? Like if you're running a business in Web 3, you still want to be able to log in and just like save your settings or set permissions, and not everything really needs to be on chain. You need to be able to tag your transactions and export to QuickBooks and all of these different things that you have to do to still kind of interface in the real world. And we think like making the right types of trade-offs between useful decentralization and useful applications is where the sweet spot's going to be in terms of building applications that people use, that retain users, that bring people back, and that ultimately bring people to the Terra ecosystem. That was a lot.
That's
But
no,
that's
it's
the enterprise
fantastic.
vision.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just gonna, I guess I'll pick one. Um, I remember years ago I used to be a freelancer, in freelance coding, freelance writing, freelance translation, whatever. And Upwork, man, I got banned from Upwork for a thing that I didn't even do. It was someone paying me. I had some thousands of dollars of an invoice, and they were paying me, and they decided to do like $100 per card on like 30 credit cards. And they didn't even have something nefarious in mind, sort of. They were just trying to max out rewards for some special rewards, like cap, right? So like if it was up to $100, they'd get some rewards. So they were just doing that. And Upwork permabanned both of us, and I went through appeal. And the emails were like, we realize this isn't the outcome you're hoping for, but there's no appeal. Your account is shut down. And just like, I didn't rely too much on Upwork at that time, but for some people, that would have been just devastating, right? Livelihood tossed out the window. All your reputation is gone because your account's, blocked, banned, whatever. All your clients, your everything is just thrown out the window. So this idea of like a labor market where I can work and build up a reputation. But I'm not, like you said, I don't have platform lock-in. To some degree, although I want to talk more about how this might look, I can take my reputation to some other similar platform or some other place, perhaps. And even if something happens to this platform or to me on this platform, it doesn't shut me down completely, and it doesn't bring me back to square one, right? How do you see that looking? Like, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So sorry, I think you were going to say, how is that going to work? So
right.
You might have heard me talk about, or if you've been following closely, you've probably heard me talk about two different things, and I should draw a distinction between them. One is Project Tashkent, and one is enterprise labor market. Project Tashkent is a set of smart contracts that anyone can use, immutable, on the chain, that we are building enterprise labor market on top of. So enterprise labor market will be our Web 2.5 implementation of a labor market. The smart contracts that underpin it will be permissionless, and just running on the Terra blockchain, so that anyone could build their own version of that application on top. There might be certain things, like I'll say right now, like we're not going to, like, we might moderate the types of jobs. Like, we don't want people posting like illegal jobs or something crazy on enterprise labor market that we don't want to be associated with. If people don't like our moderation policy or whatever it is that we decide to do, and God, I hope I don't get too deep into moderation policies. That's not what I got into this for, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Like enterprise labor market,
can't finance terrorism or whatever.
Right, exactly. Like there's just certain things that we don't want done on enterprise labor market, but and that we hope don't get done anywhere. But the set of smart contracts that underpin that are available for anyone to build. You can build a different you can build a different labor market on top of it with a different set of assumptions. You could build an entirely, the way we're building it is Project Tashkent is, Tashkent's, was a famous city that I want to go to that was on the Silk Road, that was a center of commerce historically. The idea is that it's marketplace infrastructure. So build any marketplace you want on top of it. It's all the same ideas that apply. I mean, I have friends who are big into vacation rentals, and they've spent thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars building a reputation on Airbnb. And if Airbnb kicks them off, it's the same thing, right? There are a lot of different types of marketplaces and commercial applications that can be built on top of this infrastructure. And so from a financial and from like an application perspective, those smart contracts will be out there for anyone to build on Terra. From a reputation and decentralized identity perspective, the good news is a lot of the, man, we've done a lot of work on this. So I'm really excited about this project. We haven't even begun to show what's possible, but the Web3, the standards for how decentralized identity should work are all public, and the implementation that we're going to be using to get started is Polygon ID. And so they have probably one of them, and there's a team in Cosmos that we're working with right now that has a decentralized identity platform as well. So we'll support multiple different decentralized identity providers, but Polygon ID has a really good platform that you can use. And you can go look at it yourself, right? You guys can go check it out. It's all decentralized. Your identity has nothing to do with Terra. So, and the verifiable credentials, which are the jobs and reviews that we're going to post on your behalf, are completely decentralized as well. You can display them, you cannot display them. They're completely in your control. So there's kind of like there's a whole world of decentralized identity that works just like crypto, but for your identity that can run in parallel to and be built on top of blockchain. And we'll be implementing that in two different ways, right? So the marketplace infrastructure, immutable smart contracts, use them however you want, build your own application. Decentralized identity infrastructure will allow you to choose between multiple different decentralized identity providers in our space. We're going to build a service on top of it that abstracts away all of the complications around it and makes it easy for you to generate, issue credentials. But I mean, the use cases are endless, right? Like I've talked to people, some of the DAOs that are on Enterprise DAO, you can, with the same identity, you can issue your DAO memberships that you're currently managing in Discord. And, you know, if someone was at a certain level for a certain amount of time, that's a piece of their reputation that they can always have. Protocols can issue, you know, you could build, if you remember the old Flipside degen score, or I can't remember what they called it. Like any type of recognition that anyone wants to give anyone can be issued through this, and it all becomes part of your decentralized identity and your reputation. And so we've got a lot of ideas on how we're going to like bootstrap that reputation. But the idea is that that by having this station wallet where you can also integrate identity, by having the Terra blockchain where you can post some of this stuff on the chain, and having Enterprise is like a commercial ecosystem, that we'll be able to actually bootstrap a smaller scale reputation network just kind of within the lunatic community that can then be expanded out to more and more communities as we go. And it's going to be fun. There are a lot of different ideas we have around this. I think, just to be realistic with everyone, you know, this isn't something you'll see in this year. It's much more a first half of 2024 thing, but we've already been playing with MVPs and betas. We have proof of concept, everything's built now. It just needs polish, UX and UI.
I must say the beta of Enterprise was pretty spectacular just on its own. I remember when that came out, it was like insanely easy to create a DAO, to issue tokens, do a bunch of things that otherwise you'd have to like be a nerd like Pete and use command line and all this crazy stuff that, you know, normies like us that actually have a social life don't have time to figure out, right? So I thought that was pretty spectacular. I'm looking forward to some of the other features that you guys come out with, especially like with payment streams and things like that. And another thing to add, and this is kind of not just specific to Enterprise, but to, I think, like everything TFL is building, there's like a, for better or worse, sort of like a fervor to the amount of attention that Luna gets. And I tweeted out maybe last week or earlier this week that I really think Luna has an opportunity to kind of reach escape velocity from the rest of Cosmos, sort of like it did the first time. And part of that is like, you know, think of any protocol in Cosmos and then think of Luna. And Luna, again, for better or worse, is almost like a household name compared to some of these other protocols. And I mean, I'm not trying to turn it into a competition, but I guess the question, I'm trying to lead us up to a question here, is like, what, in your opinion, like even when you're talking to, you know, maybe normie businesses or degens, one, like what is their feedback from when you say like, hey, we're TerraForm Labs, first and foremost, and then do you also sense that there's like almost an advantage to people that maybe they were formerly lunatics, or they want to, you know, get in for the next ride to the moon, or whatever? Like, what is your read on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to. I think most lunatics understand what happened with the DPEG, and I think most lunatics understood the risks associated with UST. And so when it failed, I was super naive about this. You know, it failed the way everyone thought it was going to fail, right? If it was going to fail. Now, I think I would even argue that everyone in crypto understood the risks and agreed on the risks associated with UST, right? If you go back to that infamous Jose Bankless episode with Jordy Alexander, they spent the entire time agreeing about the risks and assigning different probabilities to them, right? And that's really like, if you look at like this, the potential outcomes for UST, it was never in question kind of like what its weaknesses were. I've gone back and listened to all of those old interviews to kind of like give me, to remind myself why I got interested in it in the first place. And like he pretty articulately lays them all out all over the place, right? Like what the failure scenarios are. We all just assigned maybe the wrong probabilities. And so I think within the lunatic community, I think there are a lot of people who would be willing to get back engaged again if we actually give them something useful, because they, some of them, they went through the pain, but they understood what they were signing up for. They're responsible people, and they're willing to come back. I think beyond that, some of the accusations that have been made that haven't been proven yet still kind of linger. And so I think we do, I feel a lot of energy within our like smaller community and momentum towards building back. But I would just caution everyone that we have a lot of work to do to kind of rebuild our reputation and to prove, help everyone else find the truth before things expand too much broader, right? And we think about it in terms of, just to give you a peek on the inside of how we think about it, is like we have concentric circles of communities, right? And the smallest concentric circle right around us is our lunatics. And we've been able to touch them and speak to them directly through these spaces, and they're following everything we do. And I think they understand what TFL is up to and what Terra can be, and they're starting to see like the promise. One step out from that is you have kind of like the Cosmos ecosystem, and we were able to touch those people and talk to them at Cosmoverse. And so I think people are starting to take notice that, oh, wait, these guys are dead. These guys are serious. And then outside of that, we haven't gone farther than that yet. Like there's another conversation that's going to have to be had, and a reckoning that's going to have to be had with the larger crypto community. And then you go farther out and it's like, the broader economy. And so I think you break them off piece by piece. You do the best you can working inside out. I think most importantly for me is, okay, we've got people inside of the lunatic community excited again. We've got people talking. Now we just have to deliver. And I think before we worry about getting too far out to these other areas and like what they think about us, let's just make our own group happy. Let's get our own tribe back and engaged again and using the chain. And then we'll build momentum. I will say just one more thing on this, because people have asked, well, why didn't you rebrand? And so there's a question of whether, the Terra brand is an asset or a liability. I do agree with your point to a certain extent that it's better to be infamous than not to be known at all. And in a world where blockchains are, proliferating all over the place, and there's 10x more blockchains in blockchain space than any of us know what to do with, at least being able to get people's attention is an advantage. And I think whether we'll be successful or not really just comes down to if we execute. And number two, and then probably secondarily, like whether we can tell a story about what really happened and influence. The coverage has been so one-sided, and so can we change that narrative? But I think I'm really focused on like our tighter community first. Like, let's get them back on chain, having fun again. And if we can do that, I think the lunatics will come back in force, and everything else will take care of itself.
The CEO of TerraForm Labs speaking with prudence. Never thought I would see the day.
Yeah. I mean, I think we should, I mean, the other thing I would say is like, you're not going to hear me talking about a token going to the moon or anything like that ever again. Like, what you'll hear from me is crypto has to start building useful stuff. And crypto has to start finding products that retain users and brings them back without flooding them with free money to use your application. And so, I mean, like, I don't think there's anything about building Terra back or building any ecosystem, even from scratch, that's going to be easy. And tokens go up, tokens go down. I think the faster they go up and the more unsustainably they go up, the faster and more unsustainably they go down, or more sustainably they go down. And the reality is no one buys at the bottom and sells at the top, and you're going to get wiped out. It's impossible to try to time it. So all I want to do is like, you see these tokens over the course of 10 years, up, down, up, down, up, down. I want to make sure that like the curve that it's going up and down across points farther and farther up, right? The momentum is changing in our direction, that people are using the chain and they're using it because they found something they loved and not because we're dumping incentives on them to use it, because we know that's not sustainable.
Yeah, it does seem like the previous cycle was just like VCs pumping up incentives and then playing a game of musical chairs where, I don't know, maybe nobody won that game of musical chairs at the end of the day, but
I won't even, I won't even like assign blame to it. I think the difference is we all thought we were VCs, and VCs are incredibly sophisticated, and VCs are used to placing a lot of bets and losing a lot of them and winning big when they win. And they definitely have asymmetrical information that, you know, the people sitting here don't have. And so I don't know if anything was intentional. I don't think they're bad. We need people to invest in our projects. We need capital to flow in. We need people willing to take risks. I think one of the things we have to do is just educate our community more about like what the fundamental value is underneath the hype. And it's easy to do now because there is no hype, right? And so it's easy for me to sit here and say this now that I'm not going to sit around and talk about pumping a token. The question is like, can we still have those realistic conversations when, you know, everything's going crazy, right? And so one of the things you're going to see, some people who follow me on Twitter will have already seen this. I'm building out this DAO, growth DAO. We're finally making momentum. We've got a lot of analytics built, retention cohorts, like all of the types of metrics you need to judge if a business in the real world is gaining momentum and gaining traction. The amount of fees generated, like at some point, like anyone who's buying a token, this is not financial advice, but you know, you probably want to understand like what is that ecosystem worth versus the fees that are being generated, because that's the ultimate fundamental value. And we need to make sure, and I will make sure, and Growth DAO is going to be at the heart of this, make sure that, you know, our participants understand what's going on. They understand the health of the network. And hopefully by doing that, we engage them in ways to increase the health of the network. And so, yeah, more to come on that soon. Really excited about Growth DAO. It's like 8 people who are grinding away. I can give a tease. Here's some alpha. The 4 projects they're working on. Number 1, retention. What is the retention on our chain? What are the retention of the top applications on our chain? We're going to build out retention analytics and everything that every major protocol on our chain needs. So everyone will have a view of what's happening, including the protocol builders. The number 2 project is they're looking at our security budget. I think we spend $35 million this year to secure $5 million worth of assets. That's probably not normal or needed. We're probably overpaying for security. What should we do about it? They'll spark a conversation by putting out some proposals and ideas. Number 3, you guys might have seen, oh man, I can't remember his name, and I'm not going to look it up right now. The guy who posted a new Terra mega dashboard. We got him in the DAO. He's working with someone else. He's going to build out the Terra mega dashboard so you can just see overall health of the Terra ecosystem. And the last one is a liquidity dashboarding, just like a cross Cosmos list of all of the different pools, the amount of TVL in them, how much volume is happening, how many fees they're generating. And then hopefully that we'll use that dashboard to work with community participants on enterprise to start like thinking about how to deploy some of the liquidity from this community grant that we want to inject into the ecosystem, and like getting the community involved in combination with Growth DAO to make really smart decisions about how to deploy capital in order to capture routing from all of these aggregators. So yeah, so that's another thing, right? Like we just want to make we just want to be smarter about how we do all of this time.
Before we hop in, I mean, I want to stay here for, you know, forever and talk about treasury and DAO and reputation systems and like problems that crypto's been talking about for years that, you know, we're talking about solving here. But there's a lot more to hit. And before we move to like Warp and blockchain improvements and things that are going on there, you mentioned the community grant, and looks like it's passing pretty well so far over here on Station with an 86.5% yes and a 13.5% abstain. almost hitting quorum with, I think, plenty of time left, right? It's just came out a couple days ago. Is there anything you want to, I mean, how long have you been working? There was a, I don't want to call it an aborted attempt, but there was an earlier grant attempt that TFL then took back, after it didn't pass, and refined it and worked on it a lot, posted a lot of open discussion, a lot of, you had spaces on it, you had writing on it and so on, made huge improvements. And now it looks like it's doing great. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with refining a community grant? And
yeah, so this was a plan that Doe had in the works when he was running TFL as well. And so, yeah, here's basically the idea. And this was the fundamental idea behind the first version of this that we put out, that I would say you described it correctly. It was not well received. And the second version, the fundamental idea was the same. It was just like, we did a terrible job of articulating the value prop the first time around, and learned a valuable lesson. I think the idea is TFL has a treasury, right? There's discussion about what to do with that treasury after the DPEG, and like the community overwhelmingly voted that they wanted that deployed in service of relaunching Terra. If you would have taken that treasury and like divided it up between everyone, we would have all gotten like 10 cents. And, the idea was that if we deployed it in some kind of useful way, that we could build something better for everyone. So that's what TFL's treasury is for. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're deploying on behalf of the community at TFL. But it's not infinite. And so the idea with this grant is, how do I secure the future of TFL once this treasury is out? If Terra succeeds, I think, honestly, like the way I look at it, the way the grant is structured right now, it vests over, was it 4 years or 5 years? I think 5 years. And the first vest wouldn't happen until the end of, I'm terrible at dates. It would start in 2024, end of 2025, right? And I think that gives us enough time to actually have an impact. And that would be around the time that the treasury that we're deploying would be potentially running low. It's really hard to predict in this environment. But yeah, long story short, that's the idea, is like, okay, like we're committing a bit of capital now, but live in a state of anxiety because I don't know where the next capital is going to come from to fund the support of the Terra ecosystem. And so the grant allows us to get significantly more aggressive with our deploying of capital on behalf of the Terra blockchain and the Terra ecosystem, knowing that if we're successful, we're going to have this slug of money to continue to fund TFL far into the future. And yeah, so that's the idea. With it, we broke it up into a couple of different components. One of them is really just like a team allocation. Another portion represents an amount that we want to be able to deploy on behalf of ecosystems. So Luna that we want to be able to give out to people. Like I've said before, that Luna will be vesting over time and market cap. So we typically, to get a good partnership, we're going to have to put some upfront money into it, and then also incentivize them with Luna, so that if Luna does really well over the long term, they have upside. And then there's a last bucket here, which is a liquidity fund. And the idea there is that we have this Luna needs liquidity. But in many cases, it needs to be paired up with other assets like USDC to make it useful. And so TFL can match a portion of that liquidity fund to help be kind of like a capital spark to get activity back on chain. We're kind of stuck in this cold start problem where there are no users because there's no capital, and there's no capital because there's no users. Well, we can provide the capital, which will result in real interest rates being out there that people can take advantage of. And that will try to get people back on chain and just try to bootstrap activity again. So yeah, that's the idea. We think it's a really good deal. I mean, we're going to inject a ton of money that doesn't, and the other component of it, of course, was to do all of this without selling more Luna today. What I saw was like every community grant process ended up pitting friends against each other. Just because there's like this prisoner's dilemma that like, well, if you're taking money, that's going to put downward pressure on the price. I better get in and get mine now too. And then well, one team that deserves it isn't going to get it now because some other team did it 3 months before them. And then it was leading to this like trajectory where it just wasn't practical. Like, I mean, I think like there are some people who wish that Terra could have been reborn with just fully decentralized community governance, and it wasn't working. And the vast majority of people we spoke to wanted us to get back in and play a much larger role. And the timing of those conversations just happened to coincide with us getting reorganized and getting back into fighting shape, and in a place where we could do that and be more aggressive in terms of marketing and product development and being out front and center for the community. So yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
for those who don't.
Oh, go ahead, Pete. Sorry.
For those who don't know, if this also kind of aligns incentives, right? Because TerraForm Labs didn't have any of Luna or Luna 2. It was excluded from the airdrop, unless I'm misremembering.
That's right. There were some, just to be clear, just to be 100% transparent, we did find some in like random wallets that we hadn't excluded, but we donated all of those back.
Okay. So yeah, so you ended up with no Luna, which, I mean, I've seen companies in ecosystems which have had adverse events before. I'm not going to mention any names, but I've definitely seen companies have something happen where they don't have any stake and they just like take the money that they have and they go do something else. And obviously there were some like emotional or moral or whatever you want to call them incentives for TFL to restore, to make Terra a big, useful, economically prosperous hub again. But now we bring in the economic incentive as well with this proposal.
Yeah, and I think we need to put some economic incentives in for the team as well, right? Because it's not Doe running this anymore, right? It's a group of people who decided to stick around and even join under very adverse circumstances, and they've put their reputation on the line. They've been really loyal. It hasn't been fun, to have Terra on your LinkedIn, or, is Terra, like when you go places and people ask where you work during the worst of this, people, sacrificed a lot personally to try to pull this thing back together. And they did it because, just like I did, I feel a lot of affinity to this community, and I feel like we've gotten a bad rap, and I want redemption. But we also, I want my team that stuck around to have some upside incentive as well, and it gets them fired up. So it's always good. But the vast majority of this, just to be clear, is not going to be going to team. It'll be going to funding TFL's operations, and giving incentives to participants in the ecosystem.
I definitely agree with you on the comment about the incessant bickering within the community, and every time a proposal went up, it was like, I don't know, it was like a race to see like how big a piece of shit these people are, and let's look at their on-chain history. And like one time, one of them like stole a lollipop from the store down the street, and like we can't give them money. And it just seemed like there was, and there still is, and some people won't be happy about me saying this, but there's like a group of people that are so focused on being victims that they're never going to be anything else. And then there's the rest of the community that's like ready to move on. And I don't think Luna really is anything without TFL. That's just a matter of fact. And like you guys are still building, arguably the only thing that's still exciting about the community. I mean, you're building the tools that will help, sort of springboard the excitement in the future. But some of the I guess more fair criticism about the proposal has been, do you think that this negatively sort of centralizes Luna, and we end up kind of back where we were with Terra 1, or with Luna 1 rather, where now it's kind of like there's like this unspoken sort of invisible hand, TFL, that's driving everything. And when they want to do X, you better be on board to do X, because at the end of the day, don't bite the hand that feeds you. I mean, what's your feedback to that? Because I think that's going to be the biggest criticism.
There were definitely some valid criticism around two things. Like let's talk about the invisible hand thing, and then I'll talk about like the centralization. So like there were definitely some things that were raised that I think were really valid around that. One of them was, well, TFL is going to have this stake, and in the original version of the proposal, we could have directed it wherever we wanted to. And honestly, I just hadn't thought through all the implications of that. I was talking to the team. I was like, I don't want any. Do you know how much chaos we're going to be like involved in if we're the ones deciding where this goes? And so I think MB was the one who brought this up, that there should be some kind of committee that determines how TFL's allocation gets diversified among the different validators, right? And so yeah, like you're asking for validators. So like if I'm asking for validators to vote on this proposal to me, and I also am going to determine like where my stake is going right after they vote, you could definitely see a scenario where like, well, anyone who votes against it, like you'd be kind of insane to vote against it, right? Because like then you're like on my shit list or something if I was vindictive. So like I think that was an important thing. So just so everyone knows, we haven't outlined exactly what that committee looks like. And the reason I haven't is very specific. I don't want to enshrine some committee of people and make them the arbiters. Like I want to go, I'm not going to stake a single dollar of this until we as a community come together and come up with some decent way to do it. Like I've heard of like the Kujira Senate. I don't know what, I haven't been following like what, like how we would do this. I think it will have to be like some kind of voted, I think we'll have to have delegates or something like that. And people vote for who they want on this. Exactly. So yeah, and then I can force people to use my own product, which is always fun. So yeah, that's the idea. So we need to come up with something that the community can rally behind, and the community will decide who that is, not TFL or not a group of insiders in a Telegram group, kind of all jockeying to be on that committee. But my commitment is none of this money will go to anywhere until that group is in place and they decide to put it. So number one, I think like that was one example where like, yeah, I could see that. I think in terms of like, does this centralize things? Yes, it definitely centralizes things more than before. The argument I've made is, it doesn't make us any more decentralized than any other layer one that has our ambitions. Polygon, Solana, Ethereum. Ethereum doesn't allocate money based on community proposals, right? Polygon, Arbitrum. I don't even know which ones I said. Optimism. Like, look, I think there are some people where this is a betrayal of the idea of like this utopia where like a perfectly decentralized chain exists and everyone gets together and are able to collectively solve all of the problems. I just don't. So yes, it's more decentralized than that, or it's more central. This will definitely make it more centralized than it was before. I can't argue with that. I just don't think the existing model is effective. And so like we can keep going to Cosmoverse and winning most decentralized while we die, but I don't want to be like most decentralized and dead. I would rather be sufficiently decentralized, decentralized compared to our competition, and be effective. And so that's how I think about it. I mean, but I won't argue. It puts TFL in a powerful position. It's in my opinion, it's a vote for change in how we run the Terra blockchain, and but I think it's a good one. I think it's necessary. It's a necessary shift on the decentralization spectrum, but doesn't push us anywhere even near or past our competition.
I think that I'm excited personally most about labor markets so far. I really want to try that out. And pivoting back towards the products, I'm also like, as a dev, I find Warp very interesting. And it was, by the way, was Warp Protocol in development before the crash?
It was not. I believe it was in one of our developers' heads, Vlad. He's the head of our apps team, so Warp and Enterprise. I believe he's been working on it kind of on his own. But no, it wasn't in development. It came after. And it came again, like everything you see us building, it came as the response to a problem that we needed to solve for ourselves. And that we soon realized would resonate with other people as well. And that's our entire product portfolio, right? Foundation. I don't think people like really understood what I was saying when I was up on that stage at Cosmoverse. I spoke to a team yesterday that spends $150,000 a year on infrastructure, on nodes. And their team has spent a significant amount of time building indexers to support their application so that it can display on the front end. Well, you know, when you launch on Terra, all of your nodes will be free, right? Whether you, even on the other chains. So if you're a Terra protocol and you're, number one, you eliminate all of that upfront cost, all of that recurring cost to build out that infrastructure, all the upfront costs, not only of the infrastructure would be free, but your infrastructure on Terra would be free. Your infrastructure everywhere else will be free too, because we understand that for chains to survive and for good applications to be built, you have to go cross chain. Not only that, we're going to expose like the data, a standard data API format, so that you don't have to build indexers. You can just go get the information you need to power your front end right off the bat. What we want is that people who build on Terra are building, we want their applications to look, work, and feel better than everyone else's. We want them to get to market faster. We don't want them wasting money on infrastructure that we already have built and that they can plug into. So that's another one. Warp is an example, like off-chain automations. Like a lot of people are running all of their bots in AWS. That should be on chain. And Warp allows that. And like the use cases, like you guys, we should do another show and just bring Vlad and Georgie on to talk about all of the different potential use cases for Warp. I can't even do it justice. There's a lot of like buzz in the Cosmos ecosystem about Anoma and Uniswap X when it comes to intents-based architecture. And Warp enables intents on Terra and on any other chain that we deploy it on. And so, yeah, just really, really useful, which is kind of our keyword. And you know, it'll take a while for these things to scale to a point where they're having like meaningful fundamental value on Lunaburn. But that's not what's important. What's important is that we have a suite of tools that are useful to help builders accelerate their development and build better applications. At the same time, they drive fundamental value to Luna. And number three, they're showing product market fit, and they're doing all of it without incentives, right? So organic growth that when it does scale will be free and have positive ROI. So yeah, that's the idea.
So Warp, I mean, as a dev, I know that Warp enables all kinds of things, but for people who are watching who aren't developers or haven't thought through it, your Warp recently launched on Neutron, if I remember correctly, with like limit orders as a feature on a DEX there. So maybe it was Astroport.
Yep.
And so you could trigger, you know, without making modifications to the underlying smart contracts and things like that, you could trigger, you know, trigger transactions on certain conditions. So you could have limit orders. You could feasibly do things like stop losses, scheduled transactions, you know, scheduled
DCA.
trading strategies. Yeah, like DCA and things like that using Warp. Now, in the back end, is Warp like, can you talk a little bit about how reliable and trustworthy Warp is? Like, is Warp a server? You know, you say it shouldn't be done with AWS. Is Warp a server being run by someone? Is Warp a service being offered by nodes?
It's essentially a network of keepers, and so those keepers could obviously be running on centralized hardware, but it's a decentralized network of keepers that would execute the jobs for you. So you could spin those keepers up on Akash, I guess, and go fully try to get as decentralized as possible. Right now, we definitely run some of our own keepers to make sure that things are going well, because this just doesn't work until you reach a certain amount of scale. But yeah, so it definitely enables a transition to decentralization. I think full decentralization will come when there's more scale and volume to support what I would call a distributed ecosystem of keepers to run these jobs and ensure these jobs get done. But it's all, you know, it charges fees. It's all based on economic incentive. So if you want your job to run, if you want an automation to be run on the chain, you can incentivize people to do it. It's up to you to set the incentive for them.
What limits? I mean, you've got these keepers, and these keepers can execute transactions in the future. Basically, can trigger things. What limits? Do you have plans for Warp keepers being able to offer other things? This starts to bleed into like oracles and things like that keepers could offer to the network.
Yeah, you could definitely do oracles. You could bring off-chain information on-chain. Yeah, they have an entire roadmap. I shouldn't even get too much farther into it with you because I'm not capable of articulating it in a way that they won't beat me up for after we're done here.
We'll schedule
yeah,
that.
yeah, we'll have to do it.
Schedule that second show.
We should really get those two on. Georgie specifically is super passionate about this. He's owned this project from the beginning. He'd be a great person to talk to.
We've still got people are talking about indexer infrastructure in the comments, saying that's massive. Can we get it now? We've still got Alliance. We've still got your blockchain, Terra blockchain improvements, which I understand are big. I don't know when they're coming. Where do you guys want to go with this? We have infinite time, and there's a lot to cover still.
Yeah, I think I could talk about those two.
Sure.
Alliance is interesting, right? Like Alliance, man, I go back and forth on like what I love about it or whether I despise it, and what I think we should do with it on a daily basis. It's no doubt a very, very interesting tool. And I haven't yet figured out exactly like where it's going to find its ultimate adoption. And so we would love to get more ideas, but I mean, essentially it's a module, it's an open source module you can launch on any chain. And you can redirect your chain staking incentives to anything that can be represented by a token. And so, the use cases we've seen so far are kind of like multilateral or I guess like two-way alliances with the first chains that have implemented this, like Carbon and Migaloo. And so they allocate some of their inflation to Luna, and we allocate some of our inflation to their token. And so you can hold another chain's token and get rewarded for it, get your inflation or get your staking rewards, and you get multiple tokens coming back in. So that's cool. It's like you can diversify your yield. Like that alone is interesting. But you can do a lot of other things as well, right? Like you could put an LP token in there. So if we wanted to incentivize liquidity on a certain pair, on a certain DEX, we could put that LP token into Alliance and incentivize it with staking rewards. And now more people will be, you have additional incentive to bring liquidity. And so then you get into the question, well, should we just, like you could do LPs for liquid staking derivatives, right? And so you could still be incentivizing security with Luna, but doing it through an LP, which creates more liquidity for liquid staking derivative pairs. And so like there's like all kinds of different ways you can use this. It's an incentive. It's an incentive direction mechanism, right? And the way you want to use it is kind of up to the chain. I think the other thing that's really cool, like I think there will be ways you can do unilateral alliances, right? So like, let's say there's a chain, let's just say White Whale, and they're just tired of running their own public infrastructure. People are constantly harassing them about it. It's not what their team was built to do. They don't want to do it anymore. Well, they could come up with some deal with TFL and direct more staking incentives to Luna, in return for us running their public infra for them, or in exchange for us like opening up foundation to all of the applications on their chain, right? So they're giving benefit to the Luna token, and we're treating them like any other builder on the Terra ecosystem. And so you can start to think of ways that the set of services that Terra is building for our own builders could also be made available to other ecosystems if there was an accretive alliance formed with Luna. And so yeah, that there are a lot of different ways this could play out. You could see it as kind of like a way to exchange different types of economic value. I have extra staking rewards, you have a service I need. Or it could be completely insular, right? Like a chain could launch it, never interact with another chain, but just incentivize LP tokens or some other kind of token on their own chain.
I think we still have like 10 things that we can talk about. So to avoid being here forever, maybe we stick a pin in this, Chris. You mentioned potentially getting Vlad and the guys on the show. We can do this again. I'll volunteer Pete to do it again. I did have one other thing in my notes I wanted to talk about as well. Hold on, let me see. Oh, W Luna. But we'll save W Luna for next time. Make sure if you're into W Luna and you've been spamming about it in the comments, feel free to like, rate, share, subscribe. This is Terabytes, the best place for all of your insights and info. What did we used to say, Pete? What was the sign off before? You're muted. You're muted.
Man, I nailed it that time. I'm not going to nail it this time. Man, everybody joining us here, and you know, if you share, you rate, you like, so you subscribe, you know, you go spread the news and so on, so that your friends can discover Terra by discovering Terabytes. I think it was something like that.
Yeah, that sounded pretty good. Chris, thanks for coming on, man. Like I said, we can do this again for sure, and we can cover everything that we missed. Thanks to everybody in the comments. We had like 70 people watching at one point, so.
Nice.
Like I said, there's definitely still a community there ready and willing to support here. So
they're even asking for TerraCrumbs.
They're asking for the return of TerraCrumbs. So go find Eli for the next show, Chris.
Can we find those guys? Yeah, I don't know where they are anymore. I'll have to dig around a little bit. Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah, it was great to be back, man. God, I just love seeing the Terabytes background. Even it's bullish.
Yeah, I had to redo it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.